obviously now a global scale, right? So you had in 2002, you had SARS-CoV-1. We were lucky because the transmissibility was very low. It didn't transmit well, like the SARS-CoV-2 does now. We also had in 2012 Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, which tends to persist in the region. And now in 2020, we have COVID-19. And now let's look at the pathogenesis, right? So what actually happens? Replication of the virus begins in the nasopharynx, particularly in the olfactory bulb, the support cells of the olfactory mucosa, which you see right here. Okay, and as the virus replicates and you breathe, inhale, exhale, right? You inhale those viral particles further down into the respiratory tract where they can continue to replicate. So if you look at the respiratory system, right? You have your lungs, you have your bronchioles, you have your trachea, you have your bronchi, right? And those extend into alveoli. And that's where gas exchange occurs between the environment, right, and the blood and your body, right, where you can exhale carbon dioxide and you inhale oxygen. And in that respiratory tract, you have cells that create mucus, right, and you have cells that actually have these finger-like projections that beat up like this. They beat the mucus from the lower respiratory tract to the back of the throat, where you swallow it or you spit it out, right? And that mucus is meant to capture pathogens. So, right, so this is a closer look at the alveoli, right? They look like little bubbles, right? Little tiny sacs, and they're elastic. They kind of expand when you inhale, right, and contract when you exhale.
They look like cauliflower.
They do. They look like cauliflower, right? So now here's a little bit of anatomy of the virus, right? You have certain viral proteins on the lipid coat, right? The S protein or the spike protein, which you see in red wheat, being the most important because that is the receptor binding epitope to the ACE2 receptor on our cells. So on all of our cells, right, you have these receptors. Okay, they're like doorways. Okay. We teach the kids lock and key, right? You have to put your lock in the key in order to get through the door, right? So these receptors are the doors and the locks, and the things that bind to them, in this case, the S protein, is what opens that doorway, right? And ACE2 is a receptor, right? A doorway that plays a role in the body with respect to blood pressure and osmotic balance and stuff like that, right? So how does the virus actually enter the body? Okay, well, it binds to this ACE2 receptor right here. As you can see that S protein in green, it binds nicely to that receptor, right? And that allows for the virus to enter, okay? Enter the cell, right? Now, what do viruses do? They're not living. They're actually not living, right? The definition of a living organism is to actually replicate on its own, right? Either sexually or asexually, right? Viruses can't do that. They require a host, right? So what do? They hijack our cells. They hijack the molecular machinery in our cells to actually make more of it, okay? So the virus enters the cell, right? The nucleocapsid, the protein that encapsulates the viral genomic material is degraded, right? And then the RNA, because this is a positive sense RNA virus, right? There are different types of viruses. You have DNA viruses, RNA viruses. This is a positive sense RNA virus, which is different from influenza, which is a negative sense RNA virus, okay?
What's RNA?
So RNA, so you have your cell, right? Inside your cell, you have the nucleus, right? This is basic biology. In the nucleus, you have your DNA, right? And on DNA molecules, you have genes that code for proteins, right? And there's a stepwise story to producing a protein. So the gene is codes for mRNA, and that mRNA in the cytoplasm, when it leaves the nucleus, then codes into a protein, right? It's translated into a protein, right? Okay. So it's kind of the mRNA is the middleman between DNA and protein, right? Okay. And that's what our vaccines are now, which I'd like to talk about a little bit later. But what does the cell do? The cell then takes the RNA, the positive sense RNA, right, and it turns it into DNA, right, to produce the proteins. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't. The mRNA has the code for the S protein, the M protein, the E protein. Okay, and that is incorporated into the envelope, right? The RNA is then replicated, and it's stuck into that envelope, right, into the nucleocapsid right here. So as you can see, these are the membrane proteins of the virus, right? The viral genome is then incorporated into this nucleocapsid here, and you get a new virus, and then that is released out of the cell to infect more cells.
So basically, it acts like a body snatcher. It gets in your body and it reproduces itself.
That's exactly what it does. That's exactly what it does. So now, if we're looking at a cross section of the alveoli, you have the left side, which is a healthy individual, right? Right here, you have your blood vessel that surrounds the alveoli, and that's where gas exchange occurs. Now, on the right side, you have the inflammatory response when the virus infects the cells that line the alveolus, right? The type 1 pneumocytes, type 2 pneumocytes. Okay, so what actually happens here? Well, the virus is replicating in the cell. It's able to move into the blood vessels, and it actually can cause an inflammatory response.
You're freezing up a little bit, Nick.
Of course.
But I'm completely into this too.
Me too. I was just thinking. I hope CUNY doesn't think that we cheated them, because he's giving us a lesson here, and we didn't pay for. We didn't pay to be matriculated. Hopefully, Nick will come back shortly. I think that this is. I think it's interesting. I hope all our viewers think this is interesting. He's
back.
There we go.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So there's an inflammatory response. The alveolus fills with fluid, right? You have all of these immunomodulators like interleukins and cytokines that play a role in this inflammatory response. And what we're seeing as a clinical presentation is that people are suffering from blood clots, and we know that sometimes if you have a blood clot, that could lead to a seizure. So there are a lot of clinical representations that we are seeing with infection of this virus. Okay, there we go. Okay.
I just want to say that interleukins and cytokines sound like something out of D&D, George.
I don't know about D&D. Actually, I was a biology geek a little bit, so I know what they mean. So it's not.
Okay. I have no idea what they are, but they sound like they could be in a horror movie.
They're expressed in immune responses, right? In order to modulate. So what this picture represents is actually where the virus can infect, right? And it affects the upper airways, the mouth, the lungs, can affect the cardiovascular system, gastrointestinal tract, urinary system, pretty much everywhere where there is an ACE2 receptor, right? And if we look at where the ACE2 receptors are expressed, the ones highlighted in dark yellow, right, is where you have a high level of expression of the ACE2 receptors. Unfortunately for men, it's in the reproductive tract, right? Do we know if it has any effect there? We don't. We know that we can find the virus in blood, right? In blood and semen, in mucus, right? In saliva, you can find it. But we don't know the roles that it plays in the other fluids besides the respiratory droplets that are expelled when someone coughs or sneezes. Now, how is it transmitted? We kind of know this, right? Respiratory droplets. If you're within an individual that is infected, within 6 feet of an individual that's infected, it can be aerosolized, right? It can in distances that are less than or greater to 6 feet. So it kind of, if you think about it, if someone is coughing or sneezing or even talking or singing, those aerosols can kind of linger in the air at like head height for a while. Okay. You also get less common, but you get fomite transmission, right? So I'm sick. I wipe my nose, right? I touch my cell phone or I touch something someone else is going to touch. They wipe their nose or their eyes, right? Because that's the entry for the virus, nose, mouth, and eyes, right? And you can get sick that way, but it is less common. That's why it's very
How long
important.
does it last? Do you know? Like if I touch something and I get COVID on my hand, how long is it hanging out?
I saw. I read an article that said I think it was like 3. I want to say it was in the very beginning of the pandemic. It was like 3 to like 9 days. I'm sure some of my colleagues on here are watching. They could answer that question. But I also saw 24 hours. So you have to remember, it doesn't last long on the surface, right? It needs a host. That's what it does. If it's on the surface for a given period of time, it can't replicate. Okay.
So before you go on, I want to ask you this question, and maybe you have an answer, maybe you don't. So if it stays in the air and you can catch it that way, then why do we need a Q-tip with to go like into your nose?
That was my question.
Get an accurate test. But you can get it, with just mouth spray. I mean, is it just for accuracy's sake, or why?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Sarah's answering 3 hours in the air. It depends on what you are touching. Plastics and metals can go up to 72 hours. Thank you, Dr. G.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. So depending on where you take the sample, right? So an NP swab, the one that goes all the way back to your throat, is going to get a really, really good sample, right? It's going to be a lot of virus on that, right? Right in the nose here, right here in the nostril. That's where all the schools are doing the testing, right? You get you get a good viral sample, just not as much as you do the NP. But you can, with the tech that we have now and the sensitivity of tests, we can do the swab here. And if you do a swab in the back of the throat, you'll get even less virus, right? But you're guaranteed to get virus when you stick it all the way back there, right? That's the point of the swab. You have to get virus on the swab.
Okay, so the tests that ring the nostril and the exterior of the nostril, are they as effective as the ones that go all the way up to your brain, so to speak?
Absolutely. Okay. As long as your nasal cavity is moisturized, right? You're going to get a good sample, right? People's like, oh, they stuck the NP all the way back to my, to my brain and I was bleeding, Well, your nasal cavity probably wasn't as moisturized as it should have been, So that's why if you go to Mount Loretto and you take a test, they tell you, make sure you blow your nose. Don't wipe, but blow your nose, right? So your nasal cavity is filled with fluid, right? It's filled, it's moisturized, right? Okay.
All right, so that makes sense. That's good to know, because that was a question everybody had.
And I have one more question, not to interrupt the flow of things, right? So is my mouth less susceptible than my nose, or is it
any place that you can inhale the virus, right, or has ACE2 receptors is a platform for infection. Right. So in the eyes, you have ACE2 receptors, right? You're inhaling this. And when you inhale it and the virus lands on a cell that has these ACE2 receptors, it can begin to infect those cells and replicate. Right. So this is important stuff, the asymptomatic spread, because this is going to lead into our discussion on restaurants and, businesses and school, stuff like that. So 40 to 45% of infected individuals are asymptomatic. Right. And that's problematic. Okay, it's problematic because, the anecdotal, evidence that what I hear people say who are, I don't want to say deniers of the virus or believe that this is a hoax or not as serious as it is, right? Will usually say, well, I'm not showing any symptoms, I'm not going to get tested, right? But since you have almost half of people, who actually get tested are asymptomatic, that's an indication that there are more people in the population who actually are carrying virus, are shedding virus, and don't even know it, right? And asymptomatic people have been shown to shed virus for longer than people who were symptomatic. There's my mom. I'm watching you.
Thanks, your mom.
I saw your text, Ma. We know. We could see your comments.
Hi, Nick's mom. I don't know where my mom is. She's usually on too.
Yeah. So,
Just to be proud, Mom. We really like him. Thank you.
The asymptomatic individuals are really driving this spread. Basically, the cell's replicating, you're shedding virus, you're passing it to people, and you don't even know that you're doing it.
I was asymptomatic.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at polio, 70% of cases were asymptomatic. 70%. That's a huge amount. It's just, and this is a very, very big problem in terms of contact tracing. Right. Last episode, you guys were talking about, the 1.34% in the restaurant. I think it was 1.1% in schools, and it was like 70-something%. Right.
74%.
Yeah. And it's important that we talk about the contact tracing. I want to get through these slides really quick because there's some really good talking points. So vaccines, which is going to be I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of people commenting on the right side when it comes to vaccines. How does it work? So remember we talked about that mRNA. Right, the mRNA, the RNA, the viral genome. So that RNA has codes for the proteins that make up the virus. Right. So how does the virus get into our cells? The S protein. Right. So why not have our cells make this S protein, express it in the body, and then you can build immunity to it by making proteins against the spike protein. Right. So that's the whole process. The vaccines, the mRNA that code for the S protein, are delivered into your cells by little lipid nanoparticles. They get into the cell. The cell then translates that mRNA into the spike protein, and that spike protein is recognized by the immune system as not self, right? And you build antibodies to it, which people who have taken the vaccine group has shown that they actually build more antibodies than people who had severe disease. So Pfizer and the Moderna, right? Those are the two top vaccines that are now being distributed, right? And there are some vocabulary here we have to know, right? There's infection, there's a disease, and then severe disease, right? So infection, you could think of people who are asymptomatic, they're infected, but not showing the disease, right? The clinical manifestations of the disease. So there were two endpoints. These two vaccine trials had two endpoints. The primary endpoint was a reduction in disease, right? You have a cough, right? You don't feel so hot, right? And then severe disease is you have to go to the hospital because your O2 saturation is low. You need to be vented, right? So what these vaccine trials showed was that there was a 95% reduction in a disease. That's the primary endpoint. The secondary endpoint was 100% reduction in severe COVID-19 disease. Nobody in the vaccinated group showed severe COVID disease, which we know if everybody were to get vaccinated, the hospitalization rate would drop to 0. Right. Evidence does suggest that there could be a reduction in infection. Right. So we have to talk about neutralization. Right. And protectiveness of the vaccines. Right. So the thing is this 67% is not enough to achieve herd immunity. Right. So people could get the vaccine, get infected, and still transmit virus. They may not get that sick. Right. They may not get that sick, or they may not be sick at all. Right. But they still may have enough virus in them to transmit it. This is why the masks, they're not going away. It's not going to happen. Okay. So this was taken, this little chart here shows you, that 94.5% efficacy and 100% the efficacy. And that was taken right from the documents provided by the FDA.
Right.
So let me ask you another question in regard to that really quick. I'm asymptomatic. Do I need the vaccine?
If you are asymptomatic, right? Yes, you should get the vaccine. And here's the reason why. It depends on your level of antibodies, your titer, and how good those antibodies are, right? You could have really crappy antibodies, right, that may not neutralize the virus well if you're infected. There are some cases where people are reinfected. the virus, right? It's not a lot, but it's been shown that it can happen.
But
right?
we should be last on the list of recipients, you think?
Well, you know what? I think that if you were to get a blood test and you could monitor your antibody levels, right? If you have a high titer, you probably could wait. I would say you could probably wait, but I think everybody who could get the vaccine should get the vaccine, right? I want to address Colleen. She said, does the vaccine change our DNA? No, the vaccine does not change your DNA. It doesn't change anything about your DNA, right? It's literally just an expression of the protein in your body. That's it. There's no changing your DNA.
And then she has a follow-up.
Nanobots in vaccines? No, that's a conspiracy. You can totally dismiss that. Okay, nobody's putting that in your body. Trust me. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then says, no, they're not putting that. Yeah. And does the vaccine affect female reproductive system? Okay, so females who were pregnant, right, or were looking to get pregnant, were not in the trial, right? Women who were pregnant were not in the trial. Okay, right. They were not in the trial. So the effects of that is unknown. There's no signal to say that it would have an adverse effect for a woman who's pregnant, right? But you kind of think of it this way: there were women who were pregnant, right, or who were looking to get pregnant and contracted the disease, and there were no adverse effects to it, right? You have to think about it. The same protein that the virus will infect you, right, is the same protein that's going to be in your body, right? So let's talk about cancer rate and death rate.
Now, do their children have an advantage?
That's a really good point you brought up. So everybody can be infected by this, right? And it's imprudent to say that young children or adults don't die, or can't die, right? That's just wrong, right? It can happen. It can happen. Is the likelihood of it happening? Is the likelihood of a young child getting severe COVID disease the same as someone who's 55 and over? No. The likelihood is very, very low for a child, right? But we can't say, there are people, between. I think there's a paper I have here somewhere that looked at excess death between 25 and 44-year-olds, I think in June or July, and there were 12,000 excess deaths in that age group, right? Over 4,000 were attributed to the coronavirus, right? That's more people, who died in 9/11, right? Between that age group, right? So, young people are susceptible to this. We cannot say, we don't know what, I don't know who we're protecting, if young people are infected. Young people can be affected by this, right?
Yeah, young people can be affected. We know that. But if you look at all the data, the majority of people that have the greater risk of complications
absolutely
are in the older 65 and older.
Correct. Absolutely.
That have underlying conditions. So I think that, I'm pretty sure that, there's going to be extremists on all ends, like nanobots and virus and vaccines, which it's extreme. But I think that the majority of rational, Americans understand that kids are less likely to get it and be harmed by it.
That's wrong. They're not less likely to get it. They're less likely to develop severe disease and die. That's the difference. So we have to be very careful when we say things like that, because 40 to 45% of the infections are asymptomatic people. So if you have everybody who can be infected, how many kids are actually asymptomatic? That's one. How many of them are actually wearing masks? Right? They're going out, they're sitting in the car with their friends, they're passing a doobie, whatever they're doing, right?
We have different ideas of kids. I was thinking of kindergarten eight-year-olds.
Well, no, you know what? Think about
pot
even
smoking.
them. They have poor hygiene, right? Think about it. Their nose is always running. You know, they can't keep the mask on. You know, and I don't think they have to wear it. I think elementary kids don't have. I think according to CDC,
No, everybody has to
they
wear
don't.
it.
They don't. Okay, I'm not. I'll be honest. I don't know for 100%. But even if they do, right? I know the CDC says that kids younger than a certain age shouldn't be wearing the mask.
Right.
They shouldn't. You know.
De Blasio says everybody wears a mask, sits in their seats, doesn't move. And we have Jamie Ann is on from the DOE, NYC DOE Parents Coalition. She's one of the parents. And we've been kind of fighting for, could it be either mask or 6 feet apart? Must it be both for these little kids? They are in the mask, in the chair, can't move all day, 6 feet apart. Tough.
There's a big part of me.
It is absolutely tough. But you know what? We have to teach the kids that, sometimes to do what's right, what's necessary, we have to give up some things. We have to sacrifice for a little while, this is unprecedented times. It really, really is. And some kids are too young to understand. They really are. They just don't get it. But that's the job as a parent. That's their role. You need to explain to them, why this is happening. It's a good lesson. I know I was watching 2 episodes ago, and I know because there's a few things I wrote notes on it, because there's a few things we need to address about some of the things that were said. But when we talk about swabbing, kids, it's a scary thing. You know what? For some kids, it can. They have this person all gowned up, got the visor on, got the PPE on, all this stuff, and they're coming at them with the swab. That could be a fun event that you do at home. Take a Q-tip.
Yeah,
listen, like you train the kid. Listen, someone's gonna come up to you, do it. They're gonna go in your nose a little bit, right? Listen, let mommy and daddy do it, and we'll bake brownies, we'll bake cookies, we'll go get ice cream. You know what I'm saying? Make it a less scary event. Have walk around with a sheet around you, pretend it's PPE. Like, do something fun as a family to prepare these kids that this is something that we need to do, because the ways of the many outweigh the needs of the one. We have to think we have to think about our neighbor here. These kids, we have to do testing everywhere. You have to test, and everyone should go for a test. We have to think about it. Imagine if the 400,000+ people on Staten Island were tested. Think about what that positivity rate would do. It would spike quickly and then drop precipitously, right? Because not everybody in the island is infected. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah,
not everyone's infected.
I don't think anyone's questioning getting tested. I think it was the fact that, and Leticia, you stop me and Jamie jump in there, is the fact that they were saying you're going to get tested in school without your parent present, and you can't go to your own doctor or your own facility to get tested.
That's right.
Yeah,
okay,
right?
I could see, and I could see that. I could see where, listen, I partially agree with the parent being present if they want to be there. Okay. I could see how that may be chaotic in the school, having a lot of people, but I get it. I totally get it. And you know what? If the school grants it, then great. If that brings comfort to the parent, right, that they can be present while their kid is being tested, and the kid is getting tested, and maybe the parent wants to get tested, then so be it. So be it. So be it. Listen, so be it. As long as everyone is tested. You know what I'm saying? As long as everyone is tested.
So, Nick, let me just stop you there, because so this is a big thing. And what the parents have been saying, just so that you know, the Department of Education has sent home a consent form, basically of the parents waiving any rights to anything. The school is allowed to test their kid for COVID-19, and they cannot be present because they don't want any additional people in the school. I get that. Makes sense, right? But your kid is going to be tested by either a school nurse, a city worker, or a third-party contractor.
That's the
We
problem.
don't know who. Okay, and the parents don't know, was there a background check done on any of these people? Who are the people that they're bringing in the school? We don't know. It's a third-party contractor. So the parents said, hey, listen, and if you don't consent to this form, and if God forbid your kid gets hurt, you can't sue anybody. You can only sue the Board of Ed, but you can't sue the third-party contractor or whoever it is. But if you don't want to sign this form, your kid is not allowed in school. So my point was, don't we want more people tested? Why don't we do this? Why don't we say, look, if your kid is afraid to be tested by a third party person, you are allowed to get your kid tested at a DOE facility that same day that he was chosen out of the hat, or she was chosen out of the hat to be tested, and those test results must be sent in, and here is the information, and here's where you can go. Now you have the kid back in school, and you have more test results, because if you have all these kids staying remote, you're never going to know what's going on with those kids in that family. You have a greater opportunity if, the kid has to have a test either in school or you bring it, you bring
Right.
it. You're going to have more.
Yeah, you're surveilling the population. Absolutely. You're surveilling the population 100%. Now, but my argument is this, or my counter to that is, who's really afraid? Is it the kid or is it the parent?
It doesn't matter, because the parent psychosis is going to be passed on to the kid, and there's nothing that we can
Well, I think that could be said for everybody. Everybody's parent kind of screws them up at some point in their life, you know? You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. But,
I know exactly what you're saying. And listen, for me, if it was for my kid and knowing my kids, I know both of them would have been cool getting tested. So I would have had no problem with the consent form.
It's about my doctor too, right? I want my doctor to test my kid, right? Maybe, that, and that's because I have legal routes and ramifications through my doctor.
That's it.
Through the Board of Ed waiving that one, it releases the tester, whoever that third-party tester is, of all liability, which bothers me. I could get into why. But I just want to go to my doctor and get my kid tested and show you the results of this test from my certified MD. I don't know why that's not allowed. That's bizarre.
So let me ask, what are the potential dangers of a child being tested in the school by someone who was contracted by that lab?
The swab breaking the nasal canal because the kid starts thrashing, whatever it may be.
If the child is autistic and the child doesn't know who the stranger is, and the touch is going to make the child flail, be hurt.
Okay, so that, yes.
Be aggressive. The kid may go into a trauma for whatever reason. And the tester has to make its goal of testing everybody, and all of a sudden there's a little bit too much force. The tester is somebody who was hastily trained and may not know the real procedures and may actually infect a kid by using a dirty swab because they're not great at it.
So let me stop you right there. So no swab is dirty. Every swab is taken out of a pack. It's a sterilized swab. Those swabs are irradiated before sterilized, right? And I wish I had a Q-tip. I should have. I don't want to stick my pen in my nose, but it literally goes right. If you could, I'll zoom in on my camera so you could say it literally goes right here, right? If you could say it goes right here. Right. It doesn't go far. They go around like this, and they go around like this, and that's it.
It's not a big deal. I agree.
Now, the thing is, I do agree it could be problematic for a child who is autistic, who requires services in the school. That could be problematic, but I'm not Dr. J, I don't know where she is right now. She is an autism researcher, so she should be able to touch upon this in the comment box. But for the general population, it's not an overly traumatic experience for a child. I spoke to a public school teacher who deals with the little kiddies. I think she might even be a para for children who need those services, right? I'm not 100% sure, but I said, how is it? What's going on? And she said, oh, it's fine. We go in there, we sing songs, we play, we clap hands, and the kids get tested, and that's it. So it's not a huge deal. This is more for the parent. It's for their comfort, And listen, okay, go ahead.
Let me stop you there, because it's not a big deal for some kids and for some parents, but for others it is. Now, like I said earlier, if the goal here is to get good quality tests and to get as much of the community tested as possible. And the way to do it in the education system is to, because you can mandate the test in the education system, then why not meet those few parents halfway by giving them the opportunity? Children with disabilities can request a medical exemption, but there are some kids that it's just a stress issue, or it's just a parent's, issue. What is the difference? If the parents
it's the mandated in-school part that I think is getting everybody. I don't think I know anyone that's like, I don't want my kid tested. I don't think I know anyone.
Nobody. Yeah.
Was Jamie Ann on your show two shows ago? Is that who Jamie Ann?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I figured. Yeah, see, are you a parent? I know where that question's going, Jamie. And no, I'm not a parent. Not a parent. I've taught about 1,000 kids who, but no, I don't have a parent.
To go back to your point, Nick, about how it is in the school right now with the testing. Oh, it's nice we sing songs, because the kids that are in the school with right now, their parents have given them medical exemptions and have prepared them and told them they're going to be tested. So the parent is okay with it, which makes the kid okay.
They're already doing it because you have to take vaccines to get into school, right? So
that's a whole nother ball of wax.
But that's not done in school. You just
no, it's not done. Listen, I'm not against it. If the DOE would have granted, you can get your test from your doctor.
Yeah.
You know what?
That's what we're asking.
So be it. As long as you get the test done. But if you don't want to be tested at all, then you have the remote option.
Yeah.
That's it. Then you have the remote option, And I know, I can tell you from friends that work in the DOE, they said that how the remote learning is going now is 1,000% different than how it was run back early in the lockdown. They said they have so many resources now to reach these kids. They're on a block schedule. They said it's 1,000 times better. Again, I'm not a DOE employee, so I don't really, I can't comment on it. And I don't want to comment because that would be unfair. I can't defend the DOE employee, staff, faculty, or DOE student for that matter, because I'm not in the DOE.
And I want to bring up Danielle Zukal, who said the DOE has forms online that a parent can decline the test due to disability. So kids with autism can decline the test.
Yeah.
But I don't know what happens when they decline it. I think everyone
That's incorrect.
They might have to be
Danielle,
remote.
they have forms to have the child exempt. But the child still needs to be tested. The exemption has to be granted, and then the parent takes the child to a DOE testing facility to be tested, which makes perfect sense, right? So we're just saying, for those parents that have an aversion to and their children have an aversion to the stranger testing them in school, give them all the same option. That's all we're saying.
Yeah,
because ultimately what we want, Nick, right, is more people tested. The more people tested, the better for everybody.
So Sarah, my friend Sarah, who is an autism researcher, she's a neuroscientist, and she's basically supporting what you're saying. The kids could have developmental disabilities that may have sensory issues, and it would be difficult to test them. Absolutely, I don't think that's not ever. I agree. That would be extremely difficult. I think the bottom line is everyone who we can test should get tested. And if there are children, who, it would be extremely problematic for them, they could be exempted. They could be exempted from it, and as long as we make sure that if they have to go remote for it, as long as they're getting the services they need that they would get in the building, that they can get either remotely or from a third party. That's how I feel. We have to make sure that those children get the necessary services that they need. We cannot, that cannot be
happening right now. Just an FYI, I was on, and I don't want to turn this into a Department of Education
I couldn't speak on that anyway, so don't worry about it.
But FYI, right now there are still 30,000 kids that don't have iPads or connections to the internet that are learning remotely.
And that is a problem.
It's such a debacle. So you can understand the anxiety on a parent's part about having a third-party provider or a city worker test their kid. Not every parent has that anxiety, but the ones that do, I get it. So if our goal is to test more, then let's make those tests those tests as easy as possible and to get one as easy as possible. Let's not say your kid can't come to school if they don't allow you to test in school. Say, okay, give me the form so that I know that you're getting the test outside, but you must bring that test back.
The only issue I have with getting the test externally, let's say a parent wants to go wait on the line at Mount Loretto, right? You got to be there for 3 hours. Forget about the time. You're also in line with other people who could possibly be sick, So you don't want to be exposed. It's one thing for, listen, I go on that line, I'll take a risk. You know what I'm saying? I'll stand 10 feet from somebody, just to make sure that on Christmas Eve I could spend time with my family, because I don't want to get anyone sick. But I don't know. There is a lot. It is a messy thing, but again, go back to, if we can test as many people as we can, we should. And
do you know that the bus drivers and matrons aren't being tested? So that blows the whole theory that we got to have everybody, in school on the same day tested at the same time. But you come to school on a bus with a bus driver and a matron, and nobody tests those people. So this is the kind of asinine, stuff that the DOE does that makes parents feel distrustful. And so anyway, but let's talk about the death rate in the
So cases, I spelled that wrong. Good job, Nick. Case rate, I wrote case rate and death rate in the 5 boroughs, right? So let's take a look at this, right? So Staten Island, we're not doing so hot, guys. We're at 6.49% case rate. That's 6,490 infections per 100,000 people. We make up 5% of the total population of the 5 boroughs, and we have the highest case rate, right? Now, I want to point out the death rate, it's 0.25%. That's 25 people for every 100,000. Right? 25 people for every 100,000. The case fatality ratio, it's 3.95 people for every 100 cases.
So we have the highest case rate.
But lowest case fatality ratio. Right? Yeah. Interesting. It is interesting to look at. It's good that a lot of people aren't dying.
Right. So Manhattan has 20 case fatality rate. Oh, yeah. Okay, I got it.
That makes me question the numbers. I'm not lying to you. And again, I'm a computer scientist. I certainly don't understand biology anywhere near you and Sarah. But it immediately makes me go, why is that?
I think at first glance, it would appear that way. But then if you work, because this was sourced from Johns Hopkins University Coronavirus Dashboard, which is cut off my source. Good job, Nick. Second mistake. Got to note that, right? We need to look at the demographics, right? If you pull it up, right? This you pull up the dashboard, you look at the infograph, right? And you'll see actually how many people have employer-based medical insurance, right? They may have better access to healthcare, right, than the people who are infected in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx.
But they have public hospitals. We don't.
Listen,
we only have the 2 hospitals.
I'm only making an assumption. I don't know. I don't want what I'm saying. Of course, it is. You could look at those numbers and you could. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say. You know what? I wouldn't say distrust. I would say
question.
You know what I'm saying? I would question it. And you know what? Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson says, always be a skeptic, right? Always be a skeptic, and we should be. It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that the numbers could slightly be off. They may mean something. They do mean something. Whether that something is people are adjusting the numbers, which is, I don't think that's true. I just think that of course. But from my, as someone who teaches biology and has spent many years in science, we kind of look at it objectively and say, okay, what are the numbers telling us? What is different? What is different about the other boroughs that compared to that?
We are different, right? We probably have more people in the home. I don't know that. I'm not. I don't know the actual numbers, but I assume Staten Island has larger homes than Brooklyn, larger family gatherings because of that. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, it would be interesting to look at.
Number one is our number one employer on Staten Island is healthcare. So the majority employment in Staten Island is our first responders. Our number one.
I was thinking that.
Healthcare, and then we have the largest teachers, firefighters, and police, corrections. in New York City on Staten Island. So now you put all of those first responders together, and we need a new category for the majority of people are first responders, which would make sense for why our case rate is up so high, because we're exposed to it more.
That's true. I would say that's true. I would also tie into that the behavior. Okay. The mentality, the idea behind, I would say the obstinance to the mitigation measures. Listen, Staten Island is we have to all admit here, and it's true, we don't like being told what to do, right? And it's very difficult, right? I mean, the country was built on not wanting to be told what to do, right? Pretty much. But we have to look at the behavior. How many people actually don't want to wear the mask because they feel it's a form of control. They don't want to get tested because they feel it's a form of control. They don't want their life constrained because of this. And you know what? Nobody does. Not one person on this island or on this planet wants to be constrained by the mitigation measures that are set in place. But we have to comply, in some form when necessary. We have to think about what our actions, how they're going to affect other people.
You're making an assumption. You're making it an assumption.
Absolutely. I can't. I'm not. Absolutely.
I go out regularly, and people wear their masks in stores. People wear their masks. Mm-hmm. Every single business is complying. People are compliant. We may have demonstrations.
But that's also an assumption that all people are compliant. Just like
I'm saying that when you go into any store, people are wearing their masks. It says masks required.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not just Staten Island. This is the country. You know what I'm saying? This is not just we aren't just this is just everybody, that people are just, there are people who are for it and are sticking to it, and there are people who are really against it, and that's going to further entrench us in this. It really is.
I think if you take a look, I have spoken to, I cannot tell you, innumerable people who have told me they wear their mask all the time. They wash their hands. Their skin is coming off from the sterilizing and everything else, and they wind up getting COVID, as careful as they are, because ultimately somewhere it can happen. So I just want to go back, and I'm just saying, yes, we are protest prone in Staten Island, but I don't see any example of people not following regulations in Staten Island any more than in Brooklyn, Queens, or Manhattan.
I wasn't referring to the protest, by the way. That's not what I was. No, I wasn't referring to that, because you've seen pictures of the protest, whether in front of Mac's Public House, or you had people who were wearing masks and you had people who weren't wearing masks. Right. So it's a mixed pot, obviously. It's a mixed
everywhere.
pot.
Yeah, here's the thing that drives me crazy. You go and you see the homeless tents and the homeless villages all over the place. No masks, no hygiene, no anything. And they all must be spreading it, there. But nobody talks about that as a potential reason for the spread. And obviously they're not being tested, but I just want to ask you a question. So I believe that the reason that the case rate on Staten Island is so high is because of the majority profession in Staten Island: healthcare, law enforcement, firefighters, teachers, all first responders, all absolutely needed. They're going to work, and they never stopped working. But I want to ask you a question. Manhattan, you had a number of, was it 0.2% or was it 20% of case rate?
So the death rate is 0.2%. So it's 20 for every 100,000 people. They die.
Okay. So it's 0.2%. So look at that. This tells me a great deal about what's happening in Manhattan, right? Because Manhattan is a very populous borough as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But there's only 56,000 cases and 3,200 lowest death rate. So that means to me that Manhattan right now must be a ghost town. That the population of Manhattan has to be somewhere else.
But again, none of this is science. We're all speculating, so don't anyone write this down. We're all
but
just
that's
speculating.
unheard of, right? That number, that should be through the roof, because that's where, people usually gather. That you have millions of people in Manhattan every day, but look at that. That's very telling to me. Just thought I'd point that out.
That actually is backed by facts. So there is a big mass exodus from Manhattan. That's why the real estate value in Staten Island's creeping up really quickly, because they're trying to come to the suburbs for whatever.
And Brooklyn, Queens is almost the same, even though their population is way different. Way different.
Yeah, so, I would love us to dig into this Staten Island thing, on an actual scientific level and kind of find out. I would think that, outside of Staten Island and Manhattan should be observed as to why is the death rate lower. That number needs to be dived in on. I think it would help the world.
I have some interesting numbers here that we can talk about.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I don't know if they're right. I did the math myself. You know what I'm saying? Because I tried to search on the DOE, not the DOE, the Department of Health website, and what I was doing was comparing the case hospitalization ratio, right, the case fatality rate, and the hospitalization fatality ratio per age group. Right? I didn't put that in this presentation, but looking at 75 plus, right, age 75 plus, right, the case hospitalization rate is 46.81%. Right? 46.81%. Okay, so 46 out of 100 cases will be hospitalized. The hospital fatality rate is 57.55. So half of those people who are admitted to the hospital due to severe COVID will die in that age group. And obviously that decreases as you decrease in age. But that's pretty alarming, that half of the people over 75 have a chance of dying, right? If you look at between 65 and 74. Well, I mean, listen, if you are to bring up someone's O2 saturation, what are they doing? They're proning them, they're putting them on the ventilator. The ventilator, it can only do so much for a certain period of time. Right. We can't turn around and say, well, you put them on the ventilator, so they died. We'd have to look at how many people recovered with the ventilator versus how many people died with the ventilator and how long they stayed on it. So there's a lot of stuff. Like I'm not an MD. Maybe one day, but I'm not an MD. So I don't. I couldn't comment on that. I don't know, and that's a lot of data to look through. It's a lot of information.
It is. So Nick, obviously this is going to be studied and pulled apart and whatnot. But there's some things that I've noticed that kind of it gets me crazy. So like this morning, I read a report that we'll have 300,000 more deaths this year than the year previous, and
that's what we get into. Yeah.
Oh, good. So then I don't want to step on your. Go ahead.
No, this is taken from the IHME website, right? Which is just projections, right? So I put on the side here what you see on the graph. It says projection, masks, rapid rollout to high risk, easing, no vaccine, right? So if you look at by April 1st, if you look at easing, right? So that's no vaccine. No easing. Mandates easing. Vaccine distribution is scaled up to over 90 days. Governments do not reimpose mandates. Okay. Which one is the doctor epidemiologist? Not me.
Next week, Dr. Lauren Leahy will be.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I'd like to watch that. That's good. So, I mean, you'll see that there'll be a lot of deaths, even with the vaccine. And I don't know how much they're incorporating. I'm not sure the percentage of people that they're incorporating into this projection would get the vaccine. But obviously, if you look at the lowest death totaled on the universal,
Carmelo, screw you, because what the hell are you talking about? This man is revered in his field, and he's a biologist. And
I do teach high school. That's okay. I teach college and I teach high school. That's listen, it's totally fine. That doesn't bother me at all.
Not, because you want to know what? This man has nothing to add to anything except for snarkiness. And it's okay if he wants to be snarky on me, but I'll be good goddamn if he snarks on my guest. So
I appreciate that.
You've shown yourself to be an idiot. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
So obviously, if we look at universal mask wearing and the factors that they put into that projection, you're scaling up the vaccine over 90 days. 95% of people are wearing masks. You'll see a lot less death, right? If I go to the next slide, I chose February 21st because I wanted to show the peak where the easing, of the mandates, mask wearing and all that, 6 feet, that kind of thing. Again, you look at the universal mask wearing where the vaccine is ramped up, everybody's wearing a mask. You see the daily deaths will drop significantly, right? In total deaths, right? So your daily deaths will drop, your total deaths will drop. So, again, these are all projections. But obviously they show that with the vaccine, with wearing masks, social distancing, adhering to the guidelines, we could see a lot less death, and we'll see a lot less infections, right? So, some talking points here, I put in that we don't have to talk about them, but I put them in because it might be interesting. Why, how do we know the virus wasn't engineered? Why should everyone who can take the vaccine take the vaccine? We already talked why testing in schools is critical. Why shouldn't we assume that children and young adults are not susceptible? We also talked about that already. Is the 1.34% transmission rate in the restaurants a true representation? And can restaurants operate indoor dining during the pandemic? Right? This is where
we want to land. So that's a good one to end on, is answering these two. That'd be great.
Yeah. And going back to asymptomatic transmission, right? I want to go back to it. Okay. So 40 to 55%, right, of infected individuals are asymptomatic. That poses a problem for contact tracing. That's a big problem for contact tracing. It's hard to identify if people are asymptomatic. They don't know it. If they don't want to get a test, they're not going to get a test.
Right.
So the contact tracing is limited to that. It's also limited to the onset of symptoms. And because of the onset, it's limited to the New York City Health and Hospitals who contact trace 48 hours prior to onset of symptoms or a positive case, right? So let's paint a scenario here. You go out to eat at a restaurant. Let's say, I don't know what the max is. I think it's 4 or 6 people to a table. I don't know what the max is.
It's 4.
4 people to a table. So let's say 2 couples from 2 households go out to eat, right? They eat on Friday, Saturday they eat home, Sunday they go to a family's house, okay, where there's multiple households that are joining together for dinner. And then Monday, a few people show symptoms, okay? We know that the incubation period can be up to 14 days, right? With showing symptoms and shedding virus 2 to 3 days prior to symptom onset, right? So if you show symptoms on Monday or Tuesday, right? Let's say Monday, the New York City Health and Hospitals are going to go back 48 hours from that and say, well, you were in a family gathering on Sunday and then you had dinner with your family on Saturday, but you also, they don't ask you what you did on Friday. Now you went to go eat at a restaurant. Now, was that person shedding virus? Maybe. Were they not shedding virus? Maybe not. Was the virus replicating? Probably, right? So again, it's limited, and it's not to suggest that a restaurant is dangerous to be in, right? That's not what I'm suggesting here. What I'm saying is that the contact tracing, those numbers are limited to these asymptomatic drivers. They're limited to the incubation period, and they're limited to the 48-hour window in which the city does contact tracing, right? So with all of this, I would assume, and this is an assumption, this is why the city is prohibiting indoor dining. And my recommendation, and no one's going to like this, Rob and I bump heads on this all the time. It's wear a mask in the restaurant when you can at all times other than eating or drinking, And this whole, I don't know where they get this whole 25%, 50%,
Thank
like
you.
if they like, I want to see where they got it from. There must be something to it, but
No.
let's think for a little bit. Let's say, like, I always like to think of Rob's restaurant. He has 1, 2, 3 round tables that could seat 6 to 8 people, right? So that's going to take up more dining room real estate than a 4-top. Right. So you could replace those with a 4-top, with 4 tops, right? Put more deuces, okay? And then if you're going from 3 feet from chair to chair, go 6 feet from chair to chair, right? That's going to give you some percentage of seating capacity. I don't know what that is.
They come up with numbers of 25%, that 40. Yeah, it's all ridiculous. Give 6 feet apart and 4 to a table, to have some room.
And Nick, that was the driver. Last show I said science is not an exact science. And that's
I'm going to correct you on that, George. I wrote that down.
Yeah, I know. But this is why. Because the numbers that are being thrown at us are inconsistent and unswallowable. Is that a word? I can't swallow it. Where'd they get the 134 from?
You want to know why? You want to know why? Okay, where did the 25% come from?
And differing doctors, differing opinions, leads to distrust of the scientists. I'll use Fauci.
And you know what? That's my guy right there. All right, we cannot. I got my little bobblehead.
Well, I'm saying it because in the beginning he said don't wear a mask. Right? He said it, and I know like the environment changes, so obviously you have to change with it.
I want to shine a little light on that because I'm going to defend him here. I hope he's watching. I love that guy, but I'm going to defend him here. Where he did say in the beginning of the pandemic that it is not critical at this point because masks don't offer a full protection. Okay, and at that point we didn't have the necessary PPE to supply for for the healthcare workers. And that was not his own mandate. That was a collaboration of the people who were involved in the coronavirus task force. You had the Surgeon General who was saying a month and a half later saying, masks aren't necessary. And I think they thought it probably was necessary, but I think they were restricted by the administration in order to not create an alarm.
I don't see any evidence of Fauci being restricted by the administration. He goes against the administration.
If they all were in agreement, there must have been a discussion about it.
I think that when they did that, if you recall, the PPE was limited. And they weren't sure which type of mask, they especially the N95s, and and then when they started, when it was still limited and they realized we needed masks, they said use anything, a scarf, a bandana, whatever, just anything to stop that spray. So look, I don't blame anyone for anything. I think that Cuomo sending the people back to the nursing homes, I'm not going to lay that at his feet as him being an asshole. I'm going to lay it and say, everybody was trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Nobody knew how deadly this was going to be. We were all following Italy, slapping people on ventilators, and Italy was blowing people's lungs up. And we didn't know. I mean, how could anybody know?
Yeah, I don't blame anyone. I really don't.
In my opinion, when doctors weren't allowed to see patients, that was probably the worst thing that could have ever happened, because doctors are great investigators, and if they would have been able to see their patients, regular GPs would have been able to see their patients during those lockdowns, I think we would have learned more about the virus in a more rapid way. But we did. Yeah. We did what we did.
We have to, in the name of science, we have to kind of forgive scientists sometimes. Being on the frontier of discovery, they're trying their best, right? And to be objective, as they're limited to what they know at that time, and they're limited to the tech, and it can't appear that they're wrong, and it's not that they're wrong; they were correct at that moment, and then we learn something else. So it's not, we're learning stuff in real time. We could look back at 2002, look at SARS-CoV-1, we could look at polio, we could look at smallpox, we could look at all of these outbreaks, and we know a lot about those outbreaks, but right now we are learning in real time, and things are going to change. And That is a big concern of mine. Given because there is a large anti-science movement in this country, especially during this pandemic, because of one, a lot of misinformation, two, a lot of people, not that they're not able to understand, but it was a mental assault with all of the information on the news, right? It's a mental assault, and you really, for those who have a background in science, it was a little easier to follow. For those who are scared and nervous and don't know what's going on, who are they to believe? It's tough. But
it was the battle of the bully experts at one point in time.
It's like what's going to happen in the next pandemic? We will have one. Could be 10 years, could be 100 years from now. We're going to have another pandemic because
we got leprosy on the rise, tuberculosis on the rise. What are we going to do about the leprosy?
Well, listen.
Leprosy.
Well, listen. Well, it's important, right? It's important to vaccinate. Vaccinations are safe and they are effective. We know this. Last case of polio was 1979.
I know we're going
smallpox has been eradicated, literally extinct from the global population. When we don't vaccinate, we give these pathogens an opportunity to resurface in the population. And there are people who cannot vaccinate due to immune problems or diseases, and we can't allow them to resurface. Like what happened to the next pandemic? Hear me out. This may seem crazy, but what happened to the next pandemic if we have a virus that spills over into the population that can transmit from person to person like the coronavirus and has a death rate of Ebola, 90%? What do we do then? That causes encephalitis. That causes hemorrhagic fever within 24 to 48 hours. What do we do then? People are going to scramble.
I have an answer.
Sure.
Here's my answer, is that we're human beings, we're animals, and there are going to be diseases that are going to wipe us out. We can't save everyone. So we have to allow for free choice. And if I choose to go by Ebola or that new virus, then that's my choice. But if you choose to be vaccinated, you should be then protected from my choice of not being vaccinated. That's the whole thing about liberty and freedom. We're talking about don't do it for yourself, do it for your neighbor. Yeah. But you know what? That goes both ways. We don't know our neighbor's condition.
Our country, like you said, was built on choice, built on civil liberties, right? And each state can govern based on their own, right? Pretty much their own, their own laws and stuff like that. But when it comes to public health, that ideology does not work, because a virus and a pathogen doesn't discern between political ideologies or religious ideology. It doesn't do that. It will infect no matter who it is, whether human or animal. It will spread if it can. The virus is doing exactly what it has evolved to do. So with that being said, when, in order to stop that, right? Listen, we are a population. We are a species. We are a society.
Job to save lives. It is not the government.
It's called public health for a reason. Listen, it's called public health for a reason. We elect people to ensure our safety, right? What we want. We're electing people for the people. Is that correct? I hope I'm saying that right. I'm more of a science guy than I am a politics guy.
To represent us.
Yes, exactly.
Nowhere in the government, Constitution, Bill of Rights, any of that, does it say that the government job is to keep people healthy. The reason the government has a public health platform is to provide that service to people so that they can pay taxes. There is no reason that a government, the government, it's not their job to keep us healthy. It's our job to keep us healthy. Now, it's their job to give us all the information that they know. It's their job to do the research if that's what the people decide that we want. But it is not part of the United States Constitution or Bill of Rights that thou shalt be delivered good health. Yeah. It's not the job of government. And that's why the information needs to be put out there. But we are crossing that line now with mandating healthcare, mandating, all this public health stuff. We're now crossing into individual preference, and we can't do that.
The show's running a little long, but I did want to touch on one thing to help Nick here, right? First, I'll say this. I am an anti-vaxxer, but I will say this about vaccines. They're different now than they were back then, right? Back then, you used to get injected with a small strain of the virus, right? And what I've been reading, and you could validate this for me, Nick, because it's the internet, is that now the viruses are not injecting you with a form of COVID, right? These vaccines.
There's no virus. There's no virus in these vaccines. You have flu vaccine, polio vaccine, right? Those are either killed, or the flu vaccine is an attenuated virus, right? I believe polio is an attenuated virus, means it's engineered to be weak. The virus can revert back to wild type, which you hear as people go, I never got the flu, I get the flu shot, and I got the flu. They may have gotten live virus in there. This is not live virus. It's
important for people.
I would think it's safer. It's safer. There's no adjuvant in it. There's no preservative in it. I want to address Jamie Ann really quick. I know. I'm sorry, we're running over, but
no, it's okay. I mean, people are still interested unless George has to jump off.
She goes, "What do you consider a GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome? Isn't that another form? So Guillain-Barré syndrome is not. In some cases, the immune system does attack the nervous system, right, which could cause paralysis. What you have to look at, right, is how many cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome occur by just natural flu infection as opposed to vaccine. You'll see that natural flu infections actually cause more GBS, right? So listen, the reward outweighs the risk there, okay? Vaccines are safe and effective. Listen, I understand that everyone should have a choice, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes the choice is not the correct one,
But nonetheless, it's my choice. That's the way.
Absolutely. I understand that. I do understand it.
I would never take this vaccine because I just haven't taken any vaccine my entire life. I've never taken a pill, a shot, an antibiotic, nothing. And
Oh,
I want them to shoot it right in my ass. I'm not gonna lie. Give me the vaccine. Give it to me.
I'm with you 100%. I take every vaccine there is. I lived through the 80s, so I put things in my body that if I'm not dead now, no vaccine's gonna take. I'm with you. I take the vaccine too. But I have this real concern about government overreach. And I understand everything you're saying about public health, because you have to, right? Because you want to be empathetic and caring, and you care about human life, and you want others to live. But but that's for me that it's the government's role can't overstep somebody's individual liberties. And I look at it this way: if people take the vaccine, then they should be protected from the disease, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing. See, here's the thing. Does it protect against infection? Does it protect against the disease? You know what I'm saying? So we would hope that it protects against infection, because that would totally make it extinct, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, listen, I get it with the choice, but we have to look. I think sometimes we just have to let's objectively look at it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree.
First, before we make a decision, let's objectively look at it.
I agree. I would suggest strongly,
because the consequences, in the 2 videos ago, I think Gina Giuffre, she said, she compared vaccines to soda. Some parents let their kids drink soda. We need to have a choice, but drinking soda or not drinking soda doesn't have an effect on someone else. You know what I'm saying? Only effect on that person.
Well, it does. It drives my healthcare up.
Wow. Now I get into another.
Now we're getting into my
But not getting a vaccine, like a kid not being vaccinated against whatever they're not vaccinated against, that could potentially pose a problem to infect a child who possibly can't get a vaccine, right? They can't get a vaccine, right? Or maybe that child lives with an immunocompromised parent or guardian. It does have a consequence. So I think I'm not saying everyone should get it, go against. I think we should objectively look at it and say, hey, if I don't get it, what could happen? If I do get it, what could happen? And back to public health, its job is to keep people safe. Its job is to put the information out there and you look at CDC. CDC doesn't say that schools should close or this and that. It gives you systematic, no risk, low risk, high risk, and it gives you the option to implement those measures, and it's at the state level that they take that and they run away with it, and do whatever they feel is necessary. So, I understand the choice, but I also think in this unprecedented time, we have to look at how this can affect other people, so.
Well, I want to end on one thing, Nick. So, and we touched on it before. So with the restaurants, so you can't eat inside, but you can eat inside a heated tent with no ventilation. As a biologist.
Right. No, I know exactly where you're getting at. Listen, I'm not going to name the restaurant and call them out, but you can go on Page Avenue and you can see a completely enclosed. You guys know what restaurant I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I do.
And it's like, and I'm looking at it and I say, they have zero ventilation, zero. Like if you upgraded your HVAC system, you put in the iWave, the filters, you put in the UVC lights. I would assume. I shouldn't, I would assume, almost guarantee that you put the fan on, and let the fan run all day long, you're going to be filtering that air, constantly. You're filtering it constantly. And listen, do I feel comfortable sitting in a restaurant without a mask off for 2.5 hours? No, I don't. Will I sit there with my mask on? Absolutely. They all think I'm crazy. I go into DeLuca's and I'm sitting, when we were doing, when they were doing indoor dining, and I sit there and I have my mask on. And Rob would take your mask off. No, leave me alone. Like when I drink, I take it down and I drink and then I put it back up. When I eat, I take it down, bites, and put it. That may be extreme, but you know what? That makes me feel.
I have a mask that has an opening so that you could just drink and smoke and eat and close it.
I'm not sure that's a good mask. I don't know if I've used that one.
but I think what I'm trying to say is, then again, we hear our governor say follow the science, but when you think about those two events where you have an indoor area that has all the proper HVAC, the upgrades, the UVs, all that stuff, and then you have a tent that is basically with the flaps and the heater, and it's just like a building, but zero ventilation.
You got to remember, those tents aren't supposed to be enclosed on all sides.
Yes, but they are now. They're allowed to be enclosed in.
That's what makes us distrust our government.
The SLA just went Rob's and said that he had to make an adjustment.
Well, then that's new information.
You can't.
Because up until then, they said they gave the restaurants the permission to heat the tent.
I have to jump off. I have to get
ahead, George.
You're the best guest of the year, my friend. Thank you so much.
It was so much fun. I want to just acknowledge that we have the pain in the ass Samuel Schiff joined us, and Tina Thompson joined us, and the pain in the ass Carmelo DeBartolo, who I don't like right now because he's just been so nasty, joined us. Kim Salvo joined us, and she wants to know it's 374 days for the countdown for de Blasio. Kim. Sarah, I guess that's Dr. G. She was with us today. And let me see who else, if there were any other questions that did not get answered. Leslie Gotti joined us, and Jennifer Cuevas, who was also a guest several times, joined us. So everybody loved you, Nick. I loved you. Thank you for being able to have the back and forth, because it's important, I think, that we absorb everything and talk it out. So next week, Dr. Lauren Leahy is going to be on. She's a I know there's a better way to say it than a holistic doctor, but she's a holistic doctor, and she's going to talk about the virus, and the vaccine. She's done extensive research on the vaccine. So, I hope you watch, and
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
you feel you want to jump in, please do. And Buona Natale, everyone. Buona Natale, Kim Salvo. May everyone stay in good health. Be careful. And have a really great Christmas. And thank you again, Nick. And thanks,
Thank
Nick's
you.
mom.
Thank you. Have a nice
All
day.
right. Bye.
Bye.